Howdy, y'all, and thank you for coming along on this on our Oklahoma chapter meeting. Post Saber convention, post All-Star break, sort of. Those of us who attended the convention, myself and Ron, being the two who are present at this meeting right now, we're going to go over some of our thoughts from the convention, some of the Oklahoma takeaways, which were several. And then Fred has a presentation about his most recent trip out west regarding his grave hunting that we'll wrap up with. Um, so, with that being said, Ron, I'll yield to you as a first-time attendee, just like myself. What were your thoughts about the convention down at DFW?
Well, I thought it was tremendous. Very glad I went. It met and exceeded my expectations. Um, I'll just try to be brief. I assume you're going to cover things like trivia and baseball cards, right? Because um, Jesse and I weren't necessarily involved in exactly the same things, so I don't think there'll be a whole lot of overlap. I thought the panels and research presentations were great. I won't get into any detail on that, except I thought Bruce Bochy gave one of the best speeches I've heard. He's not a polished orator, but very heartfelt, meaningful speech. And if you care, you might get online. It's available both transcript and audio. I don't think there's a video of it, but I felt like it was worthwhile. I don't know what Jesse thought, but he really a humble man and grateful for what the game has given him, and that was one of the highlights. Um, I thought I'd just give a few quick anecdotes because to me it was a whole series of experiences. In the meeting rooms, the hallways, the games. It's just kind of an experience. And the very first night they had food and reception, social hour basically, and I didn't know anybody in the whole room except Jesse and Ken Fisher and Kevin Johnson. So, and I don't think I saw any of them. So, anyway, so I sit down at a table with three other guys I didn't know. Two of them were from Naples, Florida. One guy's a school teacher for 39 years, and he puts on a nice baseball camp every summer. I was wearing OSU garb. He saw my orange shirt, and he said, "Hey, I know a guy here from Naples that played in Stillwater." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, his name's Peter Prodnoff." And I said, "You're kidding." He said, "One of my favorite outfielders had a cannon for an arm." And so we talked a little about it. And he gave me his phone number, Peter's phone number. And I contacted him after the meeting, just reached out and sent him a copy of that article I wrote about the Gary Ward years, and he was very big part of that. So he was really appreciative. But that was just one of those chance encounters. At the same table, there was this guy that I could tell was hardcore Saber, longtime member, very knowledgeable, and he was talking about the 26 World Series and how Babe Ruth made the last out when he tried of the seventh game when he tried to steal second base. Now I'm sure most Saberites know that. I actually did not know that, but there's a lot of things I don't know about baseball history. But he mentioned that and was getting into that. And another old timer, I think a 40-year member, was sitting there. He said, "Yeah, that's when they brought in Grover Cleveland Alexander in the ninth inning to pitch in that game." And the first guy said, very politely, he stopped him and said, "No, no, that was the seventh inning, not the ninth." And that's when I knew what I'd gotten myself into at the Saber meeting when naive Ron Elliott is in among these guys that can spit that stuff out. It was pretty impressive. Um, so at the Rangers game, I sat next to a guy from California, another school teacher actually, and he said he wasn't active in Saber till the last few years. And with COVID, he got interested in the bio project where Saber members write up biographies of players, managers, and so on. And he said he really got into it. And he's written dozens of them since then. And when they had the bio project committee meeting, I went to it. I was curious, and they had his name up there as one of the top contributors. And just something he grabbed onto a few years ago, and he's really into it. And I was kind of intrigued by the bio project. I may try to write something in the future, participate in that. It's one of the good projects that Sabre has, in my opinion. Um, and then at the minor league game, the Rough Riders played Tulsa Drillers, as it turns out. I sat next to a guy that was probably about my age, and we were just chatting, and he said the first year after he retired, he went to all 30 major league parks in one season. He did the whole, you've heard about people do the, I don't know what they call it, the circuit or something where they hit them all. That, people check them off. It's bucket list type stuff. This guy did it in one baseball season. And I said, wow, that must have been fun to sit down and plan all that out when the schedule came out. And he said, yeah, the planning of it all was about as much fun as going to the games, just making it all work together. And he was pretty humble about it all, but I could tell that he really had a blast. And it was a, like I said, a bucket list type thing. And I told him he ought to write a book, um, but because I thought that was a pretty cool thing. But anyway, that's just a few chance anecdotes that I had from the meeting. There's lots of other stuff that went on and good discussions. So I'll stop there.
All right, thanks, Ron. That was good stuff. That's definitely something I can echo of you just standing around loitering in the lobby, and you never know who you'll run into and the conversations you'll have with someone because you're wearing an Expos hat or what have you. Um, but I put together just a little PowerPoint thing, so I'm going to share my screen and just go over some pictures and whatnot real quick, and yeah, sort of do some of the stuff that Ron didn't touch on because yeah, we kind of the cool thing about this is there's multiple things going on at once usually, so you can kind of create your own adventure. All right, hopefully everybody can see that. So I'll go ahead and get this started here. We'll just go through it real quick. Um, on the top left there, on the way out of town, my wife and I hit up Sparkman Hillcrest Funeral Home in Dallas because I saw that Mickey Mantle was buried there. So about 10, 15 minutes out of the way, an indoor facility, him, his wife, two of his sons all together. Um, there were still because of the proximity to Father's Day, there were still like some Father's Day cards there that some of his kids and grandkids, I assume, had left. It's a very nice setup. And this is just a artwork from inside Globe Life Park that I thought was cool. Um, and this is something that I wanted to get into a little bit. Mark Armour did this incredible presentation chronicling all of the places he was able to find where Satchel Paige pitched. Um, and you can see there's a lot. And he created this interactive map, which was incredible. And you can zoom in, and that is available. And I can put the link on our Facebook page afterwards. So I was messing around with that yesterday, and based on his research, Satchel Paige played 26 times in the state of Oklahoma, mostly in Oklahoma City and Tulsa, but there were Duncan, Bartlesville, um, kind of all over the place. The legend of the itinerant legend that he was. He was everywhere, and Mark himself even said this is an incomplete list, and he's always looking for help um, in finishing it. But yeah, that first day I was on Sabre posted some photos that they took, and for some reason they thought that me checking in was compelling. So there's me and my wife checking in. Um, she came with me as a good sport. Um, and then we had the chapter leaders meeting, um, which to sort of echo something Ron said earlier, there's nothing more intimidating than walking into a room like this of people who have been members of Sabre longer than you've been alive, and and you look around and you're like, well, it's are there any other millennials around, So, but no, it's the wisdom and the knowledge in that room was unreal, and so I had a chance to pick a couple of brains, which was nice. Um, yeah, Thursday I want to get into the trivia bit because um, myself, Ron, Kevin, and Ken Fisher were loitering around before this started, and God bless Ken, he agreed to team up with me, and we were a team of two, and this was our a team with no name. They only give you so much time to answer the questions. I didn't have time to come up with something clever. So I just scribbled that in and called it good. And we just missed out on making the semifinals. Um, and then just I guess a humble brag here of I just barely missed the semifinals. Um, which yeah, I was gonna do it. I wasn't not gonna do it. I'm just glad I didn't embarrass myself. The amount of knowledge in that room. And once we got to the finals, a lot of the same faces kept popping up. There were some heavy hitters. There was also an incredible panel with Pudge Rodriguez and Elvis Andrews and Tom Grieve. Um, they had some great stories about their time with the Rangers throughout the years, and Elvis Andrews's anecdotes with about Adrian Beltre. It was always good fun. And yeah, it's getting cut off. Maybe you can see it, but yeah, this was when Bruce Bochy was giving his speech. He got the Roland Hemond Award from SABR, and he was a great speech. And as I was going out, I heard one of the guys leave and said, "Well, we know what Bruce's Cooperstown speech is going to sound like," because it was very well thought out, kind of chronicled the decades of his career, including some of the more interesting encounters he had in winter ball overseas. Um, he had a great line that I jotted down where he was talking about Saber, and one of his players asked him what it was, and he said, "Saber are the guys and girls who know more about your career than you do," which I thought was a great line, and it may be accurate for some of them. But yeah, Bruce he was great, absolutely great, and yeah, he's got his Hall of Fame speech already in the can. Um, the Rough Riders field, when we pulled up to the bus and we saw this. This is the front of a ballpark. I told my wife it looks like someone built a ballpark in the set of Desperate Housewives. And I appreciate the architecture. I appreciate them trying to do something different. And wow, it's different. And then here, baking in the hot sun, you may have heard of it. They have a lazy river in right field. And it was especially lazy today. There was no movement at all. So it was packed to the gills with people getting that summertime combo of severe sunburn and alcohol poisoning, but they seem to be having a good time. So not for me. Luckily, our seats were in the shade, so we enjoyed that. And they had a little wall of all the guys that used to play for the Rough Riders, and so I had to find Red Sox legend Mitch Moreland, get his picture on the wall there. But it was an interesting park. I always appreciate people who are doing something different. The panels on Friday were amazing. Left to right here, obviously, we have Fergie Jenkins and Charlie Huff and Colby Lewis, who pitched for the Rangers as well. Charlie Huff is an absolute laugh riot. If you get a chance to listen to the audio of his presentation, he was great. And Fergie's one of the most distinguished gentlemen of the game. He like anytime he speaks, you listen. He had a lot of good stuff to say. There was a panel regarding the 50th anniversary of the site's decision, and Don Fear and Steve Rogers were there discussing that. Um, there may have been no one more candid than Don Fear at that entire convention. He had some very interesting things to say about the Hall of Fame and the people in it and the people not in it. He had some very matter-of-fact things about the nature of labor and the nature of unions. And Steve Rogers, a guy who played, um, had a lot of interesting things to say from his perspective of trying to drum up support as a player amongst his cohorts for the union. We went to the Globe Life Field or Globe Life Park, whatever they're calling it now, for a tour. And while we were waiting on our tour guide, we got to see Marcus Simeon warming up, and his kids were out there playing as well, so that was nice. It is a gorgeous facility. It was also nice to suck up some air conditioning. I'm not gonna lie, but it definitely didn't. It doesn't feel like a ballpark. I don't know if it's the lights, if it's the what, but after about the fourth or fifth inning, I just started walking around. I was like, this is like I had to get a better sight line or something. But it is an impress. The concourse is gorgeous. There's all sorts of you could get lost and just walk around in there. but it's a nice facility. I'm a big fan of it. Here's some of the Oklahoma connections I noticed. One of the first things I saw was this poster, Mickey Mantle's Road to the Show, Route 66, um, which people had said it reminded them of, it was the last meeting before I joined this chapter. Y'all went up to that neck of the woods with Hank to do a tour of like Baxter Springs and Commerce and that sort of thing. So it is sort of interesting to see how for a lot of that, for at least that stretch there, like how much of it did go through the Mother Road, his journey to the majors and through the minors. And we had an OU professor present some of his research, which I thought was really interesting about real-time feedback to try to prevent injuries in baseball and softball pitchers. His poster actually won one of the two awards that was given at the end of the convention. Um, it was very well done. And then, of course, we have Ron's contribution to the national pastime there, and right next to him was Southeast High School's own Daryl Porter and his 1982 World Series MVP campaign. So that was nice to see. There was all sorts of Oklahoma connections throughout this that I thought were really cool. Yeah, Saturday was the baseball card panel, which as a child of the 80s and 90s, getting to hear Dr. Jim Beckett talk about his journey to becoming sort of the king of the baseball card empire was an absolute treat, and that's him in the middle there. Um, I got to ask him a question during a Q&A, and he's a very intelligent guy he's seen the birth, death, and rebirth of an entire industry. Um, but yeah, here at the bottom you see sort of the Immaculate Feud layout. They had teams of up to five. Um, our Immaculate Feud team was just Ken and I, and anyone who's ever played Immaculate Grid knows, oh, it's like this example was Mets and Guardians, and so instead of it, when we play Immaculate Grid and we try to get the lowest score, come up with the most obscure name, it's set up like Family Feud where you try to name the most popular answers. Now, there's obviously a recency bias with some of this because you know the Saber crowd tends to skew older, and a lot of Immaculate Feud or Immaculate Grid players are all over the place. And so the top answers were guys like Carlos Carrasco and Andres Jimenez, who've been playing the last 5 years. And I'm there in my, screaming in my head, why isn't anyone saying Eddie Murray? He wasn't even one of the top six answers. So probably for the best that I didn't make it to the finals. I just would have embarrassed myself. Um, but yeah, you kept seeing the same faces go up there for the various trivia things. So there were a lot of heavy hitters, and the cream rose to the top. And this gentleman here received the Bob Davids Award. That's Tom Hufford, who is the last surviving member of the founding group of SABR. And he had some interesting stories about how they were able to communicate with one another in the days before, the internet and things of that nature, and typewritten letters, and they would seal them and mail them off from their kitchen, and so there would be cookie crumbs in some of the envelopes, and sort of a fly-by-night operation fueled by, just a dozen or so guys who loved baseball and weren't going to say no, and so they put something together. Um, and it's still going, obviously 53 years later, so that's quite nice. Um, but yeah, I had an absolute blast. They had a card vendor there, so I dropped some coin on some cards while I was there, some books and whatnot. Um, and there's a little bit of something for everyone, just in general with Saber. Like it takes all types. There's the guys who are heavy into research. There's the guys who are heavy into socializing. There's, and after every day after the games, you'd walk by the hotel bar and there'd always be a gaggle of guys watching the late games, talking whatever. So it was well worth it, and I mean it was as close as it'll ever be. So I couldn't not go. So I'm glad I went. But yeah, it was a great experience, and there's plenty more pictures and audio and stuff online if you'd like to check it out.
Jesse's being kind of humble about the trivia. I, I think it was at one of the ball games. I sat next to a young man, college age, and he said he had gone to the trivia preliminaries, thought he'd give it a try, and he got up and left after the first question was asked. And you might remember it, Jesse. It was something about five managers. What five managers from last year's playoffs or something?
Yeah, and that was
He said I didn't have a prayer. He just left, but you got it, I think.
yeah, that was better to be lucky than good. It was the question was five rookie managers took their teams to the playoffs in 2024. And I got four of them pretty quick. And the fifth one, I just wrote down Brewers manager because I was like, it was that guy. Can't remember his name. And I came back with like 10 seconds left and wrote in Pat Murphy. So yeah, I was able to get that one. But like I was talking to Ken afterwards, it's a crapshoot. You never know what questions you're gonna get. Sometimes, they might have a whole category or something right up your alley. Sometimes you like they had one for the team trivia that Ken and I did. It was a question about the 1889 New York Giants, I think. And they had like six Hall of Famers that played for them. And Ken got all six of them. And I would have had two. So it just depends. It's luck of the draw. And if anything, as like I'm not a very competitive person, but I get real jazzed for trivia. I always have. So if I ever make my way back to one of those conventions, I'm gonna be coming. I'm gonna be trying to probably do worse, but I'm gonna give it a go. Yeah. Well, I'll go ahead and open it up. If anybody had any questions about the convention or Ron and I's experience or anything, I'll open that up to anyone else who wants to interject comments, questions, what have you.
We might just say something about next year's convention. Still not announced yet, right? As far as you know, the location, Jesse.
I haven't heard anything. There
The
were some,
the CEO Scott Bush said he was asked all week long, "Where are we going next year? Where are we going next year?" And he had to say, keep a mum on it. He didn't know yet because they're waiting for the schedule to come out, and they've got a city in mind. They've got two successive weekends booked as far as hotel, with the idea that it'd be unlikely that a team would be on the road for both of those weekends, but it could definitely happen. And then they've got a plan B if that, but he didn't say what plan A and plan B were. But it's quite a, I told somebody, I thought, well, maybe Saber tells the major league schedulers that they'd like to have it on this weekend at this, and they just laughed and said, "There's no way." It's Saber comes in behind and sees what's available. Um, so, but for a lot of the, there were people there that had been to 40 straight conventions, and for them, it's a huge deal to know where the next one is. So
yeah, I heard all sorts of scuttlebutt about like someone said, "Oh, I think next year's going to be in Cleveland," and then someone said, "Oh, I think they're going to start doing minor league cities." And so like until anything comes from Big Saber, I'm yeah. But I've now that I've been and experienced it, I'm I'm hoping that the next one's in somewhere that I can convince my wife to go back and we can sort of shoehorn it in as part of a larger vacation. As long as it's, within driving distance. If it's in New York City or Seattle, I might sit it out, but we'll see. Like I imagine they'll probably announce it sooner than later. All right. Well, what I'll do then is I'll go ahead and yield the floor to Fred. He emailed me earlier regarding doing a presentation of some of his most recent grave hunting, and that's always been well received by our chapter. So I told him he could have the rest of the time. So Fred, take it away.
Okay, uh, I just had to send you a request to be allowed to share my screen. So, there we go. Now I need to find it. There we go. Okay. Oh, I won't bother trying to get it into the screen. Anyway, this recently we took a trip, but I actually have a couple comments about let's see. There we go. Ron mentioned the bio project, and whenever I visit a grave, I try to find the bio project biography of the ball player. And of the 8,000 some major leaguers I've been to a lot of other people too. I've got the bio project biographies of 30, a little over 3,000, 3,400 of them or something. That is and any of you who haven't done that and would like to get more involved in SABR, that is a nice way to do it. Just find somebody you find of interest. I've done two. I did Cleon Jones for the Sabres 1969 Mets project. Uh, he was my favorite player on, that was my favorite team. And I also did Dolly Brumfeld, who most of you have probably never heard of. She played in the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. And I did her because I happen to know her. She was a friend. She taught at the same university I did in Arkansas. First time I met her, there was a softball game going on. And usually, if you go to a ball game, the loudest fans are the ones who know the least. And she was the loudest fan, but you could tell she knew what she was talking about. And so I got to know her and really appreciated her. And so those are the two that I've done. Um, then Jesse, you mentioned the trivia. Yeah, I don't have this set up as a slideshow. Let's see.
I think if you click that button that looks like a an easel up there, I think that's it.
Yeah, I'm not. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
I've been to a few conventions. I went in 2004, and I decided I would do the trivia, and I embarrassed myself. I got 15 out of the 50 right, and 13 of the 15 I got were lucky guesses. I mean, at most places I go, I know more baseball trivia than anybody there. I go to SABR chapter meetings. I usually do pretty well. I went up there. It was like somebody who plays rookie league ball going into a major league ball game. It just um, in 2000, don't know what year it was, Chicago. I did a presentation on the worst hitters in baseball history, and I did the team trivia, and we fell one shy of getting to the finals. If my teammates had listened to me, we would have made it because there was some question about the Upton brothers milestone home runs, and I had the right answer, but they picked a different answer, and we missed by one. So if they'd listened to me, we'd have made the finals. But Philadelphia, there was one that just amazed me about how good some of those people are. There was a question, who was the first Philadelphia player to lead his league in home runs? And one guy said, oh, of course, Levi Meyerly. Of course, everybody knows that, right? No, you people aren't normal. Uh, it's just ridiculous. And you mentioned Tom Hufford. He's a great guy. I've interacted with him quite a bit. And that's one thing I've really enjoyed about SABR over the years. You got a lot of people who know a lot of stuff, but it's also a lot of people who are more than willing to help other people find out more stuff. If you're, thinking about getting involved with the bio project or whatever, but you're afraid because I don't know enough, how do I find out information? There are lots of people in SABR who'd be more than happy to help you. I guarantee it. But let's see. Let's see if this is going to work for me. Yeah, there we go. Now it's working. Okay, so I talked about that stuff. Yeah, so this most recent trip, we left town on May 4th and we returned home on July 3rd. There may be some typos in this because my laptop, the R button doesn't always work. So if you see a missing R, it's not because I don't know how to spell, it's because my computer is not being cooperative. But we were on the road for 61 days, 60 nights, which was a lot. We enjoyed it. My wife tolerated it. We were both really, really glad to get home. Drove 19,038 miles total. Yeah, yeah, that's a lot. This is where we went. Our first stop was Maryland because grandkids were doing some drama that they do. They were in some plays, and so we wanted to go see that. After Maryland, our next stop was Tucson, Arizona. And if you know anything about geography, that's not on the way to anything. I mean, it's just, but this is a list of the states that we went through. I didn't list any of the states twice because we went in and out. We were in Nevada a couple different times. We were when things were close to each other, we'd go in one state and then into another. But we were, I think it's 28 states total that we were in. And it's not like we were in Delaware and Rhode Island, the tiny little ones. We were in the big ones. I got to 802 graves total. It was actually 803, but there was one, as I was compiling my data at the end, I realized I visited him 10 years ago when I was there before. So I had to delete one from the count because I'd already gotten him. But I'm now up to 11,059. It's 8,000 something major leaguers, a lot of minor leaguers, Negro leaguers. Now, with the Negro leaguers, I haven't yet gone through to figure out which of the Negro leaguers I've seen are now considered major leaguers because of how Major League Baseball has redefined what a major league was. But that's a lot. This is the total of how many I've been to in each state with the 500 and something that I did in California this trip. I'm over 1,000 graves in California now. Pennsylvania will probably pass California after my next trip there because there are a couple hundred there. New York will get up over 800. Most of the rest of them, I've gotten everybody. Now, more people keep dying. There was one just died recently in California, and I know where he's going to be buried, but we were already home. So there was one in California. I found out after we left that he had died, found out where he was. So he was alive when I left on the trip, but I visited his grave on the trip. So there will always be more, but except for Pennsylvania and New York and Hawaii, I have been to all of the known graves at that time in those states. There are still some that I haven't been to. You notice I haven't done in Hawaii yet. Alaska's sort of cheating. I had somebody do the one in Alaska for me. It's in Eagle, Alaska, Charlie Fisher. Eagle, Alaska is middle of nowhere. You don't go there on the way to anything. It's if you look at the eastern border of Alaska where it runs vertical line with Canada, it's about halfway up there. It's at the end of a 60-mile dead end road. And I contacted the library there, and an 80-year-old woman had somebody go out to the cemetery for me and got pictures. So that is one of several now that I've visited by proxy. Ken Caminiti is another I've done by proxy. Craig Biggio took pictures for me because he's buried on a ranch that he and Caminiti co-owned, and Biggio took the pictures for me. But I'm starting to do proxy ones for places I know I'm never going to get. I'm never going to go to the Dominican Republic, so I'm going to see if I can contact some SABR people to do those for me. You see Cuba's listed. I got in touch with somebody who got in touch with somebody who got in touch with some friends in Cuba, and they did 13 Cuba ones for me. I think it's 13. I can't see the number right now. But that's my way for trying to document the ones that I am never going to get to. This is the map that I used for the trip to plan the route. The software is one that Microsoft used to make but doesn't support anymore, but fortunately my copy still works. I like this because I can see the name so I can plan out my route. But you see, I went to Baltimore first. Brooks Robinson was one of those. And then from there, we went to this one that says maybe down in southern Arizona. He's not there. So Holy Hope Cemetery in Tucson, and then making my way up. I can zoom in so I can differentiate between them because this is just an incredibly cluttered mess. This is what it looks like without the names showing. So it gives you an idea of how many that I went to. It was, I think it was 350 total cemeteries. This is the San Francisco area. We were there for 5 or 6 days. My wife stayed in the hotel while I drove around. There is one cemetery in San Francisco, the San Francisco National Cemetery, because it is not legal to bury people in San Francisco. And where there were cemeteries, they've been removed. And most of them are down here in, you see Daly City on the map. It's actually Colma, and I'll show you, I'll zoom in on that in a minute. Um, and that's where pretty much everybody from San Francisco got moved or is getting buried now. Colma has something like 2,000 people that live there and about 3 million people who are buried there. Um, Oakland, there are also quite a few in the Oakland area. Hayward. In Hayward, I visited Bud Harrelson's boyhood home. I did that because the cemetery worker I was talking to after I mentioned baseball, she said, "Oh, I grew up next to Bud Harrelson." Okay. So I visited Bud Harrelson's boyhood home. That was amusing. Um, you see Golden Gate National Cemetery right here in San Bruno. There were 28 graves there. And that's important because when we get to this next one, this is Colma. You see what, 3, 6, 8 different cemeteries that I visited there, and there are some others. But I visited 8 of them. In one day, I did the 28 in Golden Gate National. Then I went to Holy Cross Cemetery, where there are 55 in that one cemetery, and then Cypress Lawn, where there are about 20, and I got 13 of them that day. So I did 96 graves in one day, which is by far the most I'd ever done in one day. But when they're this close, it's easy. And Holy Cross and Cypress Lawn were both set up in really nice ways, and the other's a military cemetery, and those are easy. So it was a perfect storm in a good way of everything working out well to be able to see a whole bunch of them. But there were about 150 in these cemeteries right here. So that was fun. Did 16 Hall of Famers on the trip. Some of them are probably people who shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame, but that's a different issue. Ricky Henderson, I was fortunate. We did not know where he is, but I was at a cemetery and I had heard a rumor that they might have him, so I asked, and the worker said, "No, he's not here. He's at Chapel of the Chimes, which is about 100 yards away from the gate of the cemetery I was in." And I went over there, and sure enough, he is there. He's in an unmarked crypt up on the 4th floor of this giant mausoleum. But it was obviously his grave because there was a crown with a baseball in it on top. So, as far as I know, I was the first of SABR folks to visit Ricky Henderson, though I know Stu Thornley's been there since. I visited Harmon Killebrew. It's actually the second time I visited him. First time I visited him, the grave was not yet marked. I wouldn't work very hard to go there if it weren't on the way, because Payette, Idaho is not near anything. Let's see. If I were still in Arkansas, I'd talk about Arky Vaughn a lot. He's in middle of nowhere, California. That was one thing about this trip. There were times that we had to go 3 hours to the next cemetery. And then up in Montana, 8 hours to the next cemetery, because there's a lot of stuff up there, but none of it's very close. Arky Vaughn is probably in one of the most scenic ones. I didn't think to grab the picture of that to show you. Absolutely beautiful part. Eagleville, California. If you look at it on a map, it's not near anything. There's a beautiful volcanic lake up there, which is actually where he died. He and a buddy were fishing, and their boat capsized, and the water was very cold, which meant they weren't going to last very long. They got to within 20 feet of shore, but in that lake, 20 feet of shore is still about 50 feet deep. So it wasn't like they could get 20 feet from shore and walk the rest of the way in. Um, but so these are the Hall of Famers that I visited. This was an interesting situation. Brent Billingsley, I'll be honest, until I was planning for this trip, I'd never heard of him. He pitched in something like 10 games for the Marlins. I had noticed a lot of people at graves at a lot of the cemeteries that I've gone to. They're just sitting there visiting with their loved one or whatever. And I always try to give those people space. I don't want to encroach on their grief or whatever. But unfortunately, in Rose Hill Cemetery in Whittier, California, there were 4 people sitting on the ground really close to the grave I needed to go to. And as I got closer, I realized they were sitting at the grave I was wanting to go to. And so I walked up to them and introduced myself. And I always get a little nervous because if I tell them, yeah, I go around the country visiting dead baseball players, people might think I'm a little bit weird. I am. But this is his family. The one on the left is his wife, then his 2 sons and his daughter. And they were incredibly gracious. I felt like they invited me into their moment there. This was the first time he died in December. This is the first time they had been to the grave since the marker had been in place. And yet they didn't get mad at me for intruding. I don't know why, but I asked if I could take their picture and they were real gracious, allowed me to take their picture. I'm going to contact the cemetery to see if they will pass the picture on to them because I didn't think to ask, can you give me an email address so I can send you the picture later? But it came out really good. Um, and that's probably one of the most heartwarming experiences I've had since I've started doing this. That was pretty cool. Willie McCovey on the left, Joe DiMaggio on the right. Joe DiMaggio is in Holy Cross, which had 55. Willie McCovey is across the street and up the block a little bit in Cypress Lawn. Both of those real nice markers. The McCovey marker is not quite as tall as he was, but it's a big one. But those are 2 of the Hall of Famers. Tommy Lasorda. The one on the right, it's a weird situation. That's in Rose Hills in Whittier. Fred Raymer that's where he is. He's in a crypt that is behind that stained glass window. And when the light is on behind the stained glass window, you cannot possibly see the crypt behind it. And so I was only able to take people's word for it that he is behind. I found the right stained glass window and he's behind that, which I think is a little bit weird. Why would you put it in a place where nobody can see it? There were 2 guys one was in Mountain View in Oakland, and the other one was in one of the Colma cemeteries where they are in places that are closed to the public. And I don't have any idea why. But no, you're not allowed to go there. And so I'd nod and say, okay. Dennis Ryband, I just happen to like that grave marker a lot. Dennis Ryband was one of the many people who were going to be stars for the Mets back in the 60s before Tom Seaver came along and was actually a star. But I just like that marker. The one on the right, David Gregg, that's in Clarkston, Washington. He's not terribly notable other than the fact that he was the 11,000th grave I've been to. And I planned on having it be him instead of one in Lewiston, Idaho, on the other side of the river, because I had a student last semester who was from Clarkston. So I was in my student's hometown to visit number 11,000. Not that really matters to anybody but me. This one was amusing. Fielder Jones is one of 6 in a mausoleum. And I took the picture and then I noticed a little piece of paper next to the urn, next to the vase there. And it said, Mr. Jones, thank you for your contributions to baseball in Oregon. I'm a fan. And it's signed by Chris, I'm not sure, Morrow and family, something like that. Guy left a personal note next to the grave, well, next to the crypt in the mausoleum, which is sort of amusing. I also visit other famous people. This is Doc Holliday. If you have any interest in Tombstone, you would know him. This is where he might be. Pioneer Cemetery in Glenwood Springs, Colorado. This is where they think he is, although he might be in another spot on the other side of the cemetery, or he might be in Georgia. Nobody's really sure. But that picture that I took there is from halfway up the hill to the cemetery. This is where I found out I'm not in nearly as good shape as I thought I was. It took a mile of walking to get to the cemetery and back to my car, which is not real far. I can walk a mile. That's not a problem. but according to my fitness app, I climbed 15 flights of stairs while doing that. That's how steep that was to get up to that cemetery, and that's at altitude. So somebody suggested next time you do something like that, bring binoculars with you, because that way, when you need to stop for a breath, you can pretend you're looking at the view through your binoculars instead of just sucking for air and trying to breathe. But that was incredibly beautiful scenery along that trip. Then there are places like this, George Hodson, who you've probably never heard of. He's in there somewhere. I don't know if you can see there over near this tree here. You can see there are a couple grave markers there that you can see. Well, George Hodson is in there someplace and very possibly unmarked. I did not bother wading into that because no telling what kind of wildlife and insects and nasty biting things I might have encountered in there. But that's the best I can do for a picture for him. Future plans. I'm going to be going to Pennsylvania and New York, and this I shouldn't call them strays. Those are the ones that have died since I got there, or sometimes with subsequent research, we find out that this guy who died in 1897 is buried in Cleveland, and we hadn't known that. So there'll be some others. And I mentioned that I'll be looking at trying to get some others done by proxy. I'm not going to go to Mexico. I'm not going to go to the Dominican Republic, things like that. See if I can get people to visit them for me to document them. I'm also trying to figure out what to do with my collection because with all of these, I have printed all these pictures and I have them in photo albums along with their biographies and other stuff. It's about 45 or 50 feet of shelf space in one of the rooms in my house. If you ever come to the house, I'll show it to you. I know my son doesn't want them. He's not a big baseball fan. I failed as a father. Um, and I do have a library in Arkansas that has agreed to take them as part of their special collections. But I'd like, if any of you have any connections with Oklahoma State or Oklahoma University of Oklahoma, that they might be interested because they'd be a venue that would be more likely to be seen by researchers than Henderson State University in Arkansas. I'd like it if you could put me in touch with somebody because all that work, I don't want it to end up just getting thrown in a landfill someplace. Baseball Hall of Fame doesn't want them. I already checked with them. I will send them the electronic versions at some point of everything, but they don't want to devote 50 feet of shelf space to these. And I can't say I blame them. Most people aren't as passionate about this as I am. Quick commercial. If you are going to be free, this is August 8th and 9th, the Hot Springs baseball weekend. Jesse, I think you were the one that mentioned Ferguson Jenkins. He's going to be there. Al Roboski is an annual guest. He sort of acts as a master of ceremonies of sorts. Johnny Bench, Brett Saberhagen, Bill Lee ought to be interesting. Bill Lee really ought to be interesting. Steve Garvey, one of the most highly overrated players ever. It is a fantastic thing. It's completely free. Hardest part is finding a place to park. But get there early so you can get a decent parking spot. It is absolutely a wonderful experience. Hot Springs does a great job. Those of you who like baseball cards, there will always be dealers there for baseball cards. If there's any way you can get to Hot Springs, August 8th and 9th, I highly recommend it. I'm going to be going. I didn't go last year, but I think I went to the previous three. It's a great thing. In Hot Springs, they also have the baseball trail. It's a self-guided tour of spring training sites in Hot Springs. Hot Springs was one of the first big spring training facilities. They'd go there to have them go in the hot springs and soak out all the beer they'd been drinking all winter. A lot of fascinating stuff. So I would strongly recommend you go to that if you can get away for that. But otherwise, if you have any questions, well, I'll be happy to answer questions now. But if you have any questions you want to email me, that's my email address. But that's what I do when I'm not teaching.
I'm glad you brought
How
up
many,
Colma.
Fred, how many cemeteries did you say you approximately hit on this trip?
On this trip, it was about 350. Overall, I think it's 4,188.
So I'm doing the math, 60 days and over 300 cemeteries. So you didn't sit around much. I mean,
No.
golly, that's quite
Eh,
a pace.
Yeah, and now we went to Maryland, and I did the five of them there in one day, and then I didn't do any for several days, and then we had to get to Arizona. We had two 800-mile plus days of driving on the way to Arizona. And even in some of those other places, there are not a lot of cemeteries real close to each other. You leave the Phoenix area, I have to drive, hour and a half, 2 hours to get to Kingman, Arizona, then another 2 hours to get to Needles, California. But in the Los Angeles area, I would be able to get to 15 or 20, 15 to 20 in one day. Same as in the San Francisco area. So yeah, I didn't sit around much. My wife did. At the places where we stayed 5 days, she just stayed at the hotel uh, and relaxed while I ran around. I did take 1 or 2 days where I just took the day off. In Wenatchee, Washington, I had no choice because we had to get the car repaired. Our cooling fan died, and I got 4 oil changes on the trip. But there are quite a few in Oklahoma. If any, if you, or if you're in Texas, Jesse, you visited Mickey Mantle. If any of you are ever going anywhere and are interested in visiting any of them, contact me, and I can probably give you the GPS. You can pop those into Google Maps and print out a map of the cemetery so you can walk right up to it instead of wandering around like I had to do in a lot of cases.
But yeah, I'm glad you brought up Colma because I was doing some research a while back on Willie McCovey for
Hmm.
I'm not sure why, and I was looking and it said buried such Colma, California. And so I was like, oh, I've never heard of that. I'll have to look it up. And I was like, good Lord, it's just a town full of graveyards.
Yep.
And now I know why. I just thought, well, that's weird. There's a whole bunch of cemeteries in this little town just south of San Francisco.
Yeah. The one cemetery is, as far as I know, there's only one cemetery in San Francisco. There might be some in the back of a church someplace that they said, no, we're not going to dig the people up. I don't know. But the San Francisco National Cemetery, that's federal. That's federal land. That's a federal cemetery. So San Francisco's can't say, you got to dig these guys up. And there are 3 ball players in there. Um, One problem, there are some guys who died in San Francisco and were buried in San Francisco back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, very early 1900s. But then we don't know where they were taken because something happened in San Francisco, and it was 1906 or 1908, earthquake and fire. And so all of the records from the city of San Francisco about where those people would have moved to were lost. So that might be 5 or 6 guys that, based because of that, we have no idea where they are. We know they were probably buried in San Francisco, but that cemetery doesn't exist anymore, and now we don't know where they are. Cliff Carroll's one of those, I think. But I'll be happy to send you GPS if you happen to be in Montana and you want to visit somebody in Montana. I'll send you the GPS so you can find it.
Yeah, I'm always doing road trips, so yeah, whenever I come across the next one, I might have to hit you up then, because I,
Sure.
I try to I try to limit myself to like Hall of Famers. Like I'll hit the Hall
Mm,
of Famers, and I've got a couple dozen maybe, or other ones of note, especially ones that are close by. But yeah, I definitely
mm.
want to try to knock out as many Hall of Famers as possible.
Yeah, I got to was it 2 or 3? I think it was 2 on this trip. State mental hospitals, originally called Hospital for the Insane, but that's not politically correct, so they call it the state hospital now. One of them was Victory Faust, who was the mascot for the Giants back in the John McGraw era. He was convinced that based on a dream, he was supposed to pitch for the Giants. He had no talent, but he went to New York and convinced him of that, tried to convince him of that, but they let him hang around for a while and they went on a big winning streak. So they let him be their mascot. And they actually did let him pitch one game, and he was not impressive. He has a grave marker, a cenotaph in the family lot in Kansas, but he is actually buried in the Western Washington State Hospital in Steilacoom, Washington. His grave marker is a stone that says, I think it's number 1379 is all it says, but they did put another marker around it that says Charles Victory Faust because so many people have gone to see it. At the Eastern Washington one near in Medical Lake, I actually had to have an escort security because it's restricted grounds. It's still an active hospital. And so they took me down to the grave, and there for Fred Osborne, all you see is a stone that says 247. They don't want to put the names on them because they feel like that could be embarrassing to the family. At least that was what they told me. Although I had one in Minnesota and one in Ohio where I actually had armed police escorts taking me to the graves because of where the cemeteries are on the grounds and things like that, which is a little bit weird. I don't normally need an armed escort. I had to take a ferry to one of the graves in Washington. It's the third time I've had to do that. I did take a ferry to another one, although there was an alternate route. But with one, a ferry was the only possible choice. Had to pay $28 to drive on the ferry and go to see. Right now, I can't remember who it was, which is better than when I was in Massachusetts a few years ago. There was one on Martha's Vineyard and one on Nantucket where it cost me $25 and $75 to walk onto the ferry. Not even allowed to take my car, so I had to walk from the ferry dock to the cemeteries. Fortunately, they were only about a mile from the dock. So a nautical aspect to the grave hunting. Yeah, Karen, you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering, did you find any women baseball players?
Um, I have done, let's see how many. I've got my index over here. I have been to the graves of 23 women who played in the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League.
Okay.
I contacted their museum or whatever their website, and they would not help me.
Mhm.
So when I can find out about them,
Mhm.
I do them, but they weren't cooperative with me.
Okay.
Unfortunately. One other woman that I did visit would be Effa Manley, the only
Yes.
female Hall of Famer. She actually is named on two different grave markers, one in Newark, New Jersey, and one in Culver City, California. She's buried in Culver City, but Abe Manley, her husband, died about 20 years before she did. And when he was buried, they put her name on the marker in Fairmount Cemetery in Newark.
Oh,
But after he died, she moved to California. They didn't ship her back. And so I let the people know, hey, you've got a Hall of Famer's name on the grave marker here. She's not here, but at least you have her name.
okay, thank you.
Yeah. And no, I don't know how much it cost me to do all this.
I wondered when I saw the McCovey one, I thought of this question. Like as far as like the most visually stunning one that you've ever seen, like the most sort of awe-inspiring or however you want to put it.
Yeah, people ask me what's the best, coolest website, gravesite you've ever been to. I don't know how to answer that question because there's so many of them that are just cool in a lot of different ways. Um, there's one. Let me see if I can find it quickly. I think you've still got it set so I can share. I like this one because it was one of the earliest ones, um, one of the early ones that I found. Let's see, let's go back to there. Let's see if I can share again. There we go. I like that one. I'm hoping you can see it. I mean, I've been to others that looked like that, but just you walk up to this, gee, I wonder what position he played. I mean, and that's in Dixon, Missouri. And there have been others like that had I've got a folder on my computer where I keep all the baseball related grave markers. McFarland told me one time they might be interested in a book on baseball related grave markers. I need to get with them to see if they're still interested. But I like this one because this is one of the first ones that I found that was like that. Babe Ruth is cool. It's this really huge thing, but it doesn't really mention baseball at all. But yeah, Jesse, I don't know how to answer that question. Uh, what's the most interesting experience you've had finding a grave? Okay, yeah, there are a lot that would qualify. So it's hard to answer that question.
All right, Fred. Yeah, thanks
Sure.
for presenting that. That was really good stuff. Um, and sort of helpful for me to, yeah, any future trips I go on, which ones I'll need to be hitting.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, that was really all we had today in terms of anything formal. So I can sort of open it up. We can chit chat for a little bit, or if anybody had anything else they wanted to add or any other questions, I'll open up the floor one more time um, for that.
I would encourage anybody to go to the conventions. They are really a lot of fun. I think Ron and Jesse would agree with me. They're well worth the effort to go.
Yeah, by the second day, I was already trying to convince my wife to, yeah, like wherever the next one is, let's try to shoehorn it in as part of a vacation. Because like, yeah, um as I was talking to a friend of mine, he asked how did it go, and I was like, oh, it was great. Sometimes you just need to get it out of your system.
Hmm.
Because as just a baseball dork at home by myself, I just sit on a lot of stuff, and it's just nice to just spew it out at strangers. Whoever,
Yeah.
whenever you see someone and they ask you about, oh, you're a Cubs fan or whatever, and you just talk about the Cubs for 15 minutes. Like, yeah,
Hmm.
it's a hoot.
Wait, when exactly was it? Which dates?
Oh, it was in Dallas.
It was the end of
Good.
June.
End of June. Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
date?
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Because
spent my birthday. I spent my birthday there, so
okay. I was hoping to go, but I knew that there was a good chance this trip would last longer than would allow me to go there, so I didn't want to bother getting the reservations and all. And I was right. We didn't get back till July 3rd. So I was in Montana probably while you all, or Montana or Colorado while you all were visiting with all those people. I had better scenery than you did.
Yeah, we were
well,
literally across the street from the DFW airport, and my
Oh,
hotel room was on the top floor. I could have reached out my window and pet a plane. Like they were right there. Yeah.
a little bit of a shameless plug, Jesse. If anybody would want to see that Gary Ward article that was in the National Pastime, I've got a PDF of it. I'd be glad to email uh, to anybody. It's probably there on the Saber website too, somewhere, I guess. But anyway, it just chronicles the Gary Ward's 19 years at Oklahoma State.
Yeah, and it's a good read if anyone hasn't read it already. Uh, Kind of a short read, but a lot of good information. Really kind of puts into context just how dominant those teams were for the better part of 2 decades. So yeah, it's well worth it. I imagine you can find it on Saber's website soon, if not already.
Yeah, as far as brief, they held us to 2,000 words, and I at first I was cussing that, but I decided it makes you makes you a better writer and gives them a better product if you are constrained on the length.
Ron, did you go to Oklahoma State or did you teach there?
I've retired from I spent a long time on the faculty there.
Okay.
I'm a 44-year season ticket holder to Cowboy baseball, so that's I mean I've
Okay.
just been around it for a while.
Do you know Lisa Mantini?
I do not.
Okay. I know the math people there. I don't know anybody else. She's the only one that I can think of right off the top of my head. I'm pretty sure she's at Oklahoma State, but it's a little bit larger school than where I am. I'm one of two math faculty where I am now.
And I'm not on a first name basis with Robin Ventura, Pete Incaviglia, Jackson Holiday, or Ethan Holiday. So
However, Ron, you are well acquainted with Josh.
what's that?
You are well acquainted with Josh Holiday, however,
Well, Josh has spoken to a chapter meeting or two, I believe, at least one,
at least two.
at least two. Um,
He was a
it'd be
gracious
great,
host.
be great to get Matt sometime, but I don't know that he's quite the outgoing personality that Josh is. But
There are some players that are really good. I think I mentioned before, we had Sam McDowell and Jesse, you may have joined us on that meeting.
Yeah, I was
Um,
on that one. Yeah. Yeah, he was
yeah,
really good.
Sam McDowell was great whenever his co-author would shut up.
we,
His co-author seemed to think he knew more about Sam McDowell's career than Sam McDowell did.
Fergie Jenkins used to live in Guthrie for quite a while. He had like a ranchette there or something. I ran into him at the John Deere dealership in Stillwater one time, but I can't tell you where he lives now. I haven't tried to look that up. I'm pretty sure he's not still in Guthrie.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's always been the one of like with all the um, local talent that has come out of Oklahoma. It'd be like, oh, wouldn't it be great if you get a hold of some of them to come to a meeting like this? But yeah, it's like, well, who's gonna do it? Who's gonna? Because I remember having this conversation. I forget who. It's like most people are gonna want money or whatever, and so yeah, it's like no, we
Howie,
just need someone to hang
Howie,
out for a little bit.
who's the Howie? Who's the home run hitter that was revered in Japan and was a state legislator here in Oklahoma for a while?
Kevin Bass,
Randy
Yeah,
Bass.
Bass,
Randy Bass. Yeah,
Randy
Randy.
Bass.
He he would be an interesting. I've visited with him at the Capitol, and he'd be an interesting guy, but I don't know.
Yeah, Sam McDowell's the biggest name uh, player that I've ever seen at a chapter meeting. Yeah, I don't think, I don't know if Robin Ventura would be the least bit interested in chatting with the eight of us, as long as everybody promised not to ask him about Nolan Ryan.
Well, I was asked about that several times in Dallas at the convention. I get a little tired of it, but
I sort of have a working list for me of like potential. I'm just spitballing ideas for future meetings, and yeah, that's one. It's like, oh, what can we get so and so or whatever. But yeah, for that, I guess that's my shameless PSA. If anyone has, my inbox is open. I don't have a lot going on. Pretty chill over here. So if anybody has any suggestions, thoughts, ideas for any future meetings, feel free to shoot them my way. As I was talking to Ron and Kevin at the convention, the last thing I want to do is sit on here and talk for an hour straight. So I'm totally on board for letting other people drive. Facilitating, other things, getting in ideas. Um, but yeah, if nobody else had anything that they wanted to add, I suppose we can go ahead and call it. Fred, thank you so much for presenting. Ron, thanks for talking about your experience. Yeah, two first-time attendees, and we may very well be back. That was a great experience. But yeah, until next time, I will try to keep everybody posted on anything going on. My email's open, the Facebook page is open, so feel free to drop a line, anything interesting that comes through. And with that, gentlemen, enjoy the rest of your day. We'll catch you next time.
thanks, Jesse.
Thank you. Thank you, Fred.